That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, let's go through and let's talk about someone that I was telling y'all not to draft in rookie drafts last year, despite him being the best tight end prospect literally to ever walk the earth. But now let's talk about where we stand on him this offseason and if we should be going and willing to pay the price on Kyle Pitts now. But before we get into anything, for the love of God, if you have not saved the date, you better be going to the Fantasy Flock meetup on January 15th in Tampa, Florida at 3 p.m. All the info can be found here, can be found on Instagram, can be found on Twitter. You should know this by now. And also, what you should know is you can find all our Dynasty rankings over there on Patreon. And when you join the Flock on Patreon, you get an in-depth podcast breaking down your fantasy team. Not only do you get that in-depth podcast and our Dynasty rankings, but I'll make a personalized podcast breaking down your Dynasty team and the trades that I think you should be making this offseason. And at the same time, get a Fantasy Flock number cat. You get in our Dynasty group chat. You get so much over there on Patreon. And lastly, of course, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel down there in the comment section. Feel free to use that as a tool to get out your frustrations on me, to let me know, Mason, you're so stupid. I have no idea why you waste your time making these videos. I would love to hear your opinion like that down there in the comment section, but that should be it. Let's go dive into Kyle Pitts. And just to take a step back, let's remember how dominant he was as a prospect. I mean, tight end is a little bit different than a receiver. And of course, we dove in depth on this in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide of the 2021 class, which of course that was available to everybody on Patreon, as well as our 2022 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, which hopefully will be out in a couple months. But nonetheless, we identified, historically speaking, that those top tight ends, they don't necessarily just have to be productive in college. It was one of the more surprising things to me, but athleticism matters so much at the tight end position. I mean, it was weird to see the minimum thresholds just getting jacked up for your 40 time, for your size. And I didn't necessarily expect that. The top level athletic tight ends at the NFL Combine, guys like George Kittle, they're going to come through and they're going to dominate the NFL at a higher rate than the unathletic tight ends, which at wide receiver, you know that there's not really a correlation between athleticism and production at the next level, and it's more so just focused in on finding the wide receivers that were productive with context in college and translating that over to the NFL level. No, at tight end, athleticism definitely matters. Not only was Kyle Pitts a freak athlete, but he was the best. I don't want to say the best. Obviously, you have Vernon Davis, but he was one of the best athletes of all time at the tight end position. Came in at 20 years old, was 6'6", 245 pounds. That is the size of a tight end that you would create in a lab. Then throw on the fact that he has the largest wingspan pretty much of all time at the tight end position. I mean, tying Megatron with his wingspan, you go, okay, well, clearly this is an athletic specimen before he does any of the drills. Then he goes out there, runs a 4.44 40-yard dash at his pro day. I almost said combine, at his pro day, but keep in mind, you have to adjust those pro day times, so it doesn't matter. I mean, really what you want to add to it. Kyle Pitts, absurd. I mean, he is a 99th percentile athlete if you're looking at his size adjusted athleticism, even if you adjust his 40 time for it being at the pro day rather than at the combine. Now, going over and looking at how productive he was in college as well. The production pops off the charts because obviously, I mean, production is going to matter for these tight ends coming into the NFL as well. I mean, that's something else that we discussed over there in that Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. But here, looking at Kyle Pitts, played 8 games his final season at Florida. And in those 8 games, he averaged 90 receiving yards a game, almost at 100 receiving yards a game. And he had 12 touchdowns through 8 games at 20 years old. So if you're looking at the age-adjusted production, Kyle Pitts was one of the best tight ends of all time as well in college. I mean, obviously went to Florida, played in the SEC. Now, what's interesting now is once we've seen a couple of these other Florida prospects come out at the receiver position, we have a better idea of the fact that, I mean, he did deal with serious target competition. I mean, Kadarius Toney actually led this team in receiving yards his final year at Florida. Kadarius Toney came out, and his rookie season in the NFL, he gets selected in the first round by the Giants. He definitely has some flashes. I believe Kadarius Toney had a game this year where he had 189 receiving yards in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, yes, he dealt with a bunch of injuries, but he played all 11 games his final season alongside Kyle Pitts at Florida. So that really shows that Kyle Pitts was not just dominating on an offense that had no other option but to get the ball to him. Rather, Kyle Pitts was a weapon that was commanding volume even in a great offense. And we can go through and we can look at the previous year in Florida. I mean, going back to his true freshman season, there's another receiver on the roster. I'm pretty sure this is where Van Jefferson was. Let me double check. Yeah, Van Jefferson, as we said, was on this team as well as Kadarius Toney. So there have been multiple wide receiver talents at the next level in Florida that are creating target competition for Kyle Pitts in college. So you're looking at Kyle Pitts saying he looks like he was built in a lab with his size. He looks like he was built in a lab with his athleticism. He looks like he was built in a lab with his collegiate production. This is literally as if you went to create a player on Madden and then took every single slider and just went 99, 99, 99, 99, 99, as if you're 12 years old and you go, you know what? I want to create the best tight end of all time and I want to dominate this league. I mean, it's kind of funny. And then he goes out there and is the highest drafted tight end of all time in the NFL draft. So for this reason, of course, Kyle Pitts had an absurd amount of dynasty hype last offseason. Most people were ranking him as the tight end dynasty one overall right away. And I wasn't willing to buy into that because historically speaking, what you've found from rookie tight ends is they are almost always overdrafted because they go out there and they usually aren't that impressive their rookie seasons, and that usually lowers people's expectations, even though everybody in the dynasty community understands you should not expect production from your rookie tight end. And every single offseason, people will say, I'm going to draft rookie tight end X, I'm going to go draft Josh Oliver. And even if he's not productive through the first 2 years, it doesn't matter because you're expecting the breakout in year 3. We all know this at the tight end position. And then they don't produce year 1 and everybody lowers them down their rankings as if they didn't say that the year prior. But with Kyle Pitts, he came out, he had a damn good year his rookie season. Now, what's interesting is his value hasn't gone any higher. Now, of course, we were saying to draft players that were at positions that were going to produce as rookies. We were saying to draft Najee Harris. We were saying to draft Travis Etienne. We were saying to draft Jamar Chase. I get it. Travis Etienne didn't work out. Travis Etienne obviously got injured, but we were trying to identify those players that would produce right away as rookies. That way, A, we would have someone to put in our starting lineup, and B, hopefully their own dynasty value would increase, and then we could trade them for Kyle Pitts the following offseason. And I honestly want to say, I mean, it's worked out. If you were the guy going through and drafting Najee Harris, with Harris, you got in a top 10 running back his rookie season, whereas with Kyle Pitts, you had a low-end tight end 1. So you smashed this year. And now if you're looking at dynasty startups, at least every dynasty startup that we have done this offseason, I mean, obviously, those are just mock drafts at this point over there on Patreon. We'll get the real Patreon dynasty leagues hopefully going in about a month. We got to collect dues for all the leagues that are currently running. But nonetheless, you're seeing Najee Harris, you're seeing Jamar Chase go ahead of Kyle Pitts in every single one. So now we have to ask ourselves, is it viable to have that same strategy we had last offseason and then taking Najee Harris and trading him now after we've gotten the rookie season production for Kyle Pitts before the blow up? And now pulling up Kyle Pitts to see exactly how great his rookie season was, I want to say, I mean, if you're looking at the fantasy production, it's not fantastic. Like Kyle Pitts in redraft leagues, I'll say he was a horrendous pick in redraft leagues. He was going in the 3rd round in underdog drafts. Like, no idea what the hell was happening. No idea why people were drafting him as the tight end 4 off the board as a rookie. He ended up being the tight end 11 in points per game behind Dallas Goedert, Dawson Knox, Dalton Schultz, TJ Hawkinson, Darren Waller, Gronk, Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews. I apologize. Tight end 10, tomato. But if you look under the hood a little bit, it's actually way more impressive than this. Because one thing that we talk about in projections from a year-to-year standpoint is we know that touchdown efficiency is going to be the most volatile statistic that you're going to have. And what's actually the stickiest statistic in using it to project future fantasy production is going to be the volume that player had in the form of targets, yards, and receptions, understanding that touchdowns are a small sample game and really they're just going to be up and down given the nature of small samples. Well, looking at this, you actually have Kyle Pitts from a targets per game perspective, he was the tight end 4 in the NFL, only behind the combination of Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, and Mike Gesicki. So the tight end 4 in targets, that is a massive mark, and that is incredibly impressive as a rookie. Not to mention that Kyle Pitts wasn't a regular rookie. It's not like Kyle Pitts stayed all 4 years at Florida and then came out and played his rookie season at 22 years old. Kyle Pitts somehow declared for the NFL draft in his mid-20s, and he played the majority of his rookie season at 20 years old. At 20. Most tight ends don't break out until the time they're 24, 25. So for Kyle Pitts to have this production at 20 years old, yeah, he was 21 at the end of the year, but still, incredibly impressive. And what's more impressive than this is the list that he is on if you're looking at his receiving yards on a per game basis. Now, if you're going through checking this out, you have Mark Andrews at 1, Travis Kelce at 2, George Kittle at 3, Darren Waller at 4. Okay, so you have the who's who at tight end. You just have stud after stud after stud. After that, you got Kyle Pitts, a 20-year-old rookie, and Rob Gronkowski right after him. Possibly, in my opinion, the best tight end of all time. So Kyle Pitts is finding himself in great company. And I've already seen tweets on Twitter. I've already seen people reach out to us on Patreon saying, oh, Mason, Kyle Pitts is about to be the #1 tight end in NFL history in receiving yards his rookie season. And while, yes, that's definitely a notable statistic, the initial thought that I have when someone reaches out to me with a statistic and they're talking about totals rather than a per game basis is I'm saying, okay, if you're just talking to me about a player getting to milestone X, if you're talking to me about, just say the perfect example is Jason Witten. Jason Witten, the tight end position so many years ago, he would come out and on a per game basis, he would be a tight end 2 that you couldn't start, but he'd play 16 games every single year. So all of a sudden he would find himself as a top 10 tight end in fantasy, even though it didn't really matter. It was just a statistic about him being very durable and being able to play every game. Well, Kyle Pitts played every game this year. So whenever we hear that he's going to be the #1 tight end of all time with rookie season receiving yards, I kind of overlook it just a little bit. But if you go through and if you sort this by a per game basis to really get a great feel of it, Kyle Pitts is still damn impressive. I'm going to go through and look at this list. Kyle Pitts is going to finish this year, unless he completely bombs out this last week, which you shouldn't expect. You should expect him to come out and have a decently strong performance in week 18. He is going to finish only behind Mike Ditka in receiving yards per game at the tight end position their rookie season. Right now, at the time of this recording, he is sitting at 63.6 receiving yards per game. That is absurd. To then go through and look at his size-adjusted athleticism, to look at the fact that he had 12 touchdowns his final season at Florida and only 8 games played, and knowing that if he continues to get this volume with the red zone threat that he is shown to be in college and the big playability that he has indicated by his athleticism, you know that Kyle Pitts is at the minimum going to be near league average with his touchdown rate going forward. So if he continues to get this type of volume, and you'd imagine that the volume gets an uptick this following season with him developing 1 year further into his NFL career. So the volume's going to go up, but what is going to drastically skew up is actually going to be the touchdown rate. And that is going to be massive because if we get this compounding effect of more targets and significantly more touchdowns on a per target basis, which usually it's the opposite. Usually if you get the volume going up, sometimes the efficiency goes down. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think Kyle Pitts, his second season, is going to be able to command more targets and more fantasy points per target. You're looking at Kyle Pitts having a ceiling of being the tight end 1 overall this next year, not only in Dynasty, but in just regular fantasy football. The tight end 1 in 2022. So for this reason, for the historic rookie season that he just had, which was, expected. This is what you should have expected for Kyle Pitts. Now, yes, I wasn't drafting him at tight end 4 in a redraft format. Now, yes, I was going through and taking someone like Najee Harris over him, just knowing that, historically speaking, the running back's going to produce their rookie season and you could buy the tight end a little later on. I don't want to apologize. I'm going to say our plan is just going as planned. We're going to go through and I'm going to take Najee Harris where we drafted him last year and we are trading him for Kyle Pitts. I'm going to go through and I'm going to take, I hate saying this because obviously Jamar Chase just dropped 50 points. And I will say it comes down to your league format, because if you're playing in a dynasty format where you start 3 receivers and then you have 3 flex spots, their receiver is going to be king and you're not trading Jamar Chase for Kyle Pitts. However, if you're playing in a league that only has 2 starting wide receivers and potentially 2 flex spots, where instead you can easily get that replacement level production with someone like Elijah Moore from someone else's bench. And what you should be chasing in that format is difference making players at the onesie positions in quarterback and tight end, with how the math checks out and how they'll actually account for a very high percentage of your starting lineup output every single week. Give me the elite onesie skill positional player in Kyle Pitts. I think if we're talking about just a standard 12-team Superflex tight end premium format, I know some people were making the argument last year. I wasn't, because we weren't expecting a ton of rookie season production from a rookie tight end, because historically it's not a great bet. I think Kyle Pitts is probably my favorite rookie in last year's class at this point. And I know it's bold to say that Jamar Chase is putting up the best rookie wide receiver season of all time. Kyle Pitts just did that at tight end. So if you're playing in a tight end premium format, give me Kyle Pitts. I would go through and I would trade Jamar Chase for him. I'd trade Najee Harris for him. I'd trade Javonte Williams for him. Of course, you can't trade Travis Etienne for him. Nobody's going to be making that deal. But nonetheless, Kyle Pitts, maybe I would trade Trey Lance for him. If it's a tight end premium format, I would consider. Y'all know how much I love our boy Trey Lance, but it is what it is, because Kyle Pitts truly does look like he has that tight end upside to be tight end 1 overall. And don't come and throw a bunch of hate my way, because I think you're buying Kyle Pitts at the same exact price that he was last offseason. And I can tell you one thing right now. When we go through the Dynasty offseason and people really reflect on the season that we just had, and people really reflect on what Kyle Pitts did as a rookie, Kyle Pitts is going to end this offseason as a round 1 Dynasty startup pick. I can guarantee you that. And JN and I were talking on the main fantasy football channel that we have. We were just getting a 2022 best ball draft going, and JN decided to take Mark Andrews. And I was just talking out loud. It's before we really dove in depth with what Kyle Pitts truly did his rookie season. I was saying, who would you rather have as your tight end 1 in Dynasty at this point? Mark Andrews, who clearly just came out and had an extremely strong end to his, I believe, not third season. He was drafted in 2018, 2019, 2021. Yeah. So his third, fourth season, I have no idea what the hell it is, but nonetheless, I was saying, would you rather have Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts in Dynasty? And we had Jay, and I know definitely said this. I think we had some other people in the chat also going through and saying Mark Andrews. I don't think we can do that. I mean, if you pull up Patreon right now and you check out where we have Kyle Pitts in our Dynasty rankings, I will have him at tight end 1. And from a Dynasty perspective, if you're playing in a tight end premium format, I think I would prefer having Kyle Pitts over any other wide receiver at the same time, unless it's a league where you start 3 receivers and then you have more than 3 flex spots. So then it's a hyper flex league. And if it's a hyper flex league where you need that wide receiver depth, of course, that skews some things. But I truly think that he has league breaking upside. Please let me know what you think about Kyle Pitts, because the more I talk myself into it, the more I'm thinking maybe the only non-quarterback, of course, from a super flex format that I want over him is going to be Jonathan Taylor in a Dynasty startup. Outside of that, if it's a tight end premium format, I think you could easily talk yourself in to the next great tight end in the NFL, and possibly the tight end 1 overall next year at 21 years old. But of course, let me know what y'all think. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Hope you have a great day, and I hope that we get to see you out. Actually, I was going to say in a live stream soon. We're not live streaming every single night anymore. Hope I either get to meet you in person at the Fantasy Flock meetup, or I get to talk to you over there on Patreon later today. But thank you again, and have a great one.